We talk a lot about buying low in fantasy football, and while it's a sharp move to make, it's not the only way to gain an edge on your league mates. Sometimes, the ultimate power move is buying high. In these scenarios, we are paying a premium for a player coming off of a massive performance, but we still believe they're going to continue to increase in value. Yeah, we might have missed that buy low window, but we're still gaining access to the player before they reach the top. After combing through all of the data for the first 4 weeks of the NFL season, I have the ultimate buy high candidate. This player's historical comps are going to blow you guys away. And even more importantly, even though he's coming off of his best game, the trade market remains reasonable. He's not going to be cheap, but these are trades that you can get done and feel good about it. The player that we are talking about is none other than rookie quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, Anthony Richardson, who's averaging 22.4 points per game. That's 5th at quarterback, but it could be even higher than that. In week 1, he scored 22 fantasy points despite missing the final 3 plays of the game. Normally that's not a big deal, but they were from the 1-yard line. He had a chance to punch in a rushing score or throw for a touchdown that would have added to his total. In week 2, he scored 18 fantasy points despite only playing 30% of the snaps. He played 2 snaps in the second quarter before Gardner Minshew took over. And finally, in week 4, we saw a full performance from Richardson. He gave us 28 fantasy points. Richardson ranks number 1 in the NFL in fantasy points per dropback at 0.79. The next 2 closest players are Lamar Jackson at 0.69 and Josh Allen at 0.63. The list of quarterbacks to score at least 0.70 fantasy points per dropback since 2011, it's a very short list, but it should get you really excited. It's Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson times 2, Cam Newton, and Robert Griffin III. The big question? Can Richardson keep up this pace and join that group of players who averaged 25 points per game and all finished inside the top 8? We turn to the data to get our answers. It's probably no surprise to you, after hearing that list of names, that the big common denominator was their ability to get things done on the ground. That group averaged 58 yards and 0.6 rushing touchdowns per game. If we take a look at Richardson, we have to do a little bit of math and extrapolation here because he's only played 9 quarters, but he's averaging 14.6 rushing yards per quarter. That comes out to 58 yards per game. Right on the nose, dead on with what we saw from the comp group. If we look at his touchdowns, he's at 0.44 per quarter. That comes out to 1.76 per game. Obviously, that's not sustainable, but the nice thing is there's plenty of room for him to regress back to the 0.6 we saw from the comp group. Well, the rushing performance is nice, but I have taught you guys better than that. What does the underlying utilization tell us about that comp group? Well, on average, they handled 21% of their team's designed rush attempts, and they had an 8.5% scramble rate. Well, fortunately for us, there's a place for free that we can go look at Anthony Richardson's utilization and see how it stacks up against this comp group. We can go to fantasylife.com, click on the utilization suite of tools, go to game log and select the Indianapolis Colts and see that Anthony Richardson is at 22% of the Colts' designed rushing attempts in the games he's played, and he's at an 8% scramble rate. Again, we are in lockstep with the comp group. Now I know what some of you are wondering, and I think you're right to do so, but you're thinking, Anthony Richardson, he's not a very good passer. So how does what he is doing in 2023 stack up versus those historical comps in the passing department? And for that group, they averaged 219 passing yards per game along with 1.8 touchdowns. Richardson is averaging 53.2 yards per quarter. If we extrapolate that out, that comes out to 213 passing yards per game, 6 yards under our comp group. And if we look at his touchdowns, he's at 0.33 per quarter. That would come out to 1.3 per game. Now, that number is slightly lower than the 1.8 we see from the comp group. But remember, where we're willing to talk about regression to the mean with his rushing touchdowns coming down, we have to consider the same with his passing touchdowns. There is a range of outcomes where that number moves slightly up. But even at 1.3, we're going to be close. And once again, while the production is nice, we always want to refer back to that underlying utilization and also look at the efficiency in the passing attack. And for that comp group, they average 33 dropbacks per game and 28 pass attempts. And when we take a look at Richardson, he's sitting at 38 dropbacks per game and 32 passing attempts. So he's actually above the comp group in both categories. Under Shane Steichen, this is a very different Colts offense than what we've seen over the past few years, where they wanted to run the ball most of the time. They weren't very fast. All of those things are gone. It's the opposite now under Steichen. This is a pass neutral team, and they're running plays with tempo. And if we take a look at the completion rate for that comp group, it's at 64%. So it's really a good thing that we're getting those extra dropbacks. We are getting those extra passing plays for Richardson because he sits at 57%. This was a challenge for him in college. Over the first couple of games, we didn't see it. It did not rear its head at the NFL level. But this last week, we saw his completion rate plummet to 44%. So we know we're going to get occasional games like this. He's probably not going to be a 64% passer, but because of how many plays the team is running and how many more dropbacks he's seeing, it is enough to help offset the accuracy issues. So let's summarize. Where are we with Anthony Richardson versus this comp group of Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton, and RG3? Well, overall, we are really close. We are dead on in most spots, maybe a little high in some spots, a little lower in others, but overall, we should feel pretty good about the comp group. And that makes Richardson someone we should prioritize as a trade target. So let's talk about what some of the trade options might be. What does a buy high look like on Anthony Richardson? And this is some really good feedback that I've gotten from you guys on these types of videos. Who are some of the names I should be considering? Who should be some of the targets? The way I prepare is I go in and look on Yahoo. I look at their trade market and see what are the trades going down. And it'll give you the last 25 that have happened today. I've got it up for you on the screen. I'm not going to scroll through a bunch of these. I've actually broken them into buckets that we'll talk through. But you can see right away, we've got Zay Flowers on the screen here. We've got Isaiah Pacheco in the view, just looking at the 1-for-1s on Anthony Richardson. I'm not saying all of these are realistic. Like Sky Moore's on here. Like, I don't know what's happening in that league. That's probably some sort of collusion or something weird. You got Alexander Madison. You got a straight up for Kirk Cousins. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you guys can go check this out over at Yahoo and use this intel to really help you. And now let's stop and let's break this down into some different categories and how I would think about making a move for Anthony Richardson. So I've been refreshing that Yahoo data throughout the day and catching things before they fall off because you can only see the last 25 trades. And I've broken them down into 3 groups. 1, these are my instant yeses. The next, probably a yes, as long as it makes sense for my team. And then the final one, it's a really close call, but maybe I ask for a sweetener in the deal. And a couple of quick caveats before we jump into these. Number 1, remember, you want to look at your trade partner's roster. A lot of times in home leagues, someone that drafted Anthony Richardson, they've already got Jalen Hurts. They got to round 10. They didn't know who else to draft. I heard of this Anthony Richardson guy. They take him. They have Josh Allen plus Anthony Richardson. So know where your leverage is. If they've already got one of those elite quarterbacks, they might be willing to let go for a little more as long as it makes their roster better. The other thing you want to remember is I'm not doing this for just any player. The reason we did all of the research up front together on Anthony Richardson was to show us he has the profile worth buying into even at a high because we believe we are still going to get more value. This doesn't apply to any other type of player. They've got to have this kind of profile. So now let's dive into the buckets. So the first bucket, these are instant yeses. And remember the caveats. There's a reason I'm saying yes to these players so quickly. Breece Hall, I'm doing it. I want Richardson in my lineup next week. Breece Hall might be worth something big by week 10, but the Jets are not good. Are they really going to push him? Jordan Addison, great young player, part-time role. Will it expand? I don't know yet. I would rather have Anthony Richardson. Zay Flowers, really like him. But the Ravens are not suddenly a pass-first unit like we thought they might be, and Mark Andrews is still going to get his. I really like Zay Flowers, but I will take Anthony Richardson. Gabe Davis, slam dunk. Alexander Madison, slam dunk. Again, these are all real trades that happened today. Let's talk about this second group of players. I'm willing to move on from these guys. I want to make sure that it does make sense for my roster, but I'm going to pull the trigger. Nico Collins. You guys know how much I love Nico Collins. He's a fun player. He was a fun player to be right on this year. He's the wide receiver 7 right now in fantasy. But when I look at the profiles, as much as I like him, Anthony Richardson has a higher chance of continuing to do what he is doing. Tank Dell, same thing. Christian Watson, you guys know how much I love him, but he's right now coming off of an injured hamstring. He could re-injure that. If I need the quarterback to give me a chance to battle Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, I'm willing to move Christian Watson to get this deal done. Ramondre Stevenson. The Patriots don't look good. The utilization is there, but this is a team that's really struggling. I will go ahead and take Anthony Richardson now and start using him next week. And this final bucket, these are some players that are going to be tougher to let go of. But if you can make it make sense for your roster and get a little bit of a sweetener in return. And remember to check who their QB1 is. If they've got a really good QB1 and QB2 is Anthony Richardson, there's going to be a chance you can make this sweetener happen. But Devin Achane is the first guy. I love him. This doesn't mean he's not going to be valuable in fantasy. He absolutely is, but he's due for regression. He can't score this many touchdowns. He can't break this many long runs every week. He can still be a hyper-explosive player and be someone that helps you win a fantasy championship. But right now, he's at a sell-high moment, and you compare that with a buy-high on Richardson. The other name, David Montgomery, very similar, coming off that 3-touchdown performance, but not a very efficient running back. We like him. We like him. The Lions love him. They're going to keep using him as long as they can, but Jahmyr Gibbs is there. He's eventually going to get a little bit more work. The game scripts are not going to all work in Montgomery's favor. So if I can sell high, and again on these moves, I want to know that you've already got 2 other running backs you feel great about. That's something that needs to make sense for your team. The final one is Alvin Kamara. Comes back and has all of those receptions in the first game. We really like him, but this is an aging running back. In an offense where if Derek Carr does struggle to get healthy or re-injures that shoulder, there's a lot of risk associated with Alvin Kamara. And so if I can get something like Richardson plus a little bit more back, I am going to make that deal.